And thank you for tuning in. My name is Doug McDonald and I'm the CEO of the Alamo. The Alamo is committed to telling the rich history of Texas, and right now is no different. Traditionally on this day, we are honoring the bravery of those who fought in the Texas Revolution, and specifically in the Battle of San Jacinto, with various events and ceremonies all around this great state. Things are a bit different this year, but the story must still be told. We were determined that COVID-19 was not going to stop Texans from observing this important day, so we stepped up to bring this important celebration into homes across the state, country, and world. We are so glad the Texas Historical Commission, the San Jacinto Museum, and Presidio La Bahia answered the call to action. And we are proud today to present to you San Jacinto Day, Texas Remembers. As always, we greatly appreciate your passion for Texas history and thank you for remembering the Alamo. We hope you and your families stay safe and healthy.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Mark Wolf, the Executive Director of the Texas Historical Commission. Thank you for joining us today for one of the most unique San Jacinto Days Texas has ever celebrated. The first San Jacinto Day commemoration was held April 21st, 1837, in what was then the new capital of Texas, the city of Houston. President Sam Houston led a celebratory procession down Main Street, and that evening a grand ball was held in one of the young community's many unfinished buildings with freshly cut pine boughs forming a makeshift roof. From this first San Jacinto Day, Texans have continued to celebrate April 21st as the day their struggle for independence ended and the bright future of Texas began. Over the course of the short-lived republic and throughout its time as a state, Texans have celebrated this day in different ways: parades, parties, reenactments of the battle and other significant events from our history, the San Antonio Fiesta and the Aggie Muster. Whatever the form of the celebration, the intent was the same. Texans take this day to recognize the extraordinary sacrifice made by soldiers and civilians alike, and to celebrate the victory at San Jacinto and what it means to be a Texan. In that respect, April 21st, 2020 is no different. While this is not the original celebration we intended, we are still excited to gather virtually this afternoon and remember together the 18-minute battle where Texas was born and history was forever changed. Today, all Texans continue to write that story and demonstrate our resolve, courage, and innovation to the rest of the world. On behalf of the Texas Historical Commission, I want to thank our partners, the Alamo Trust and Presidio La Bahia, for sponsoring this special commemoration event. Thank you all, and remember San Jacinto.
Every proud Texan can tell you what this scene is. Topped by a massive four-sided Lone Star on the top, a concrete and steel column majestically rises 570 feet over one of the most sacred sites of Texas. It stands as the second highest monument in the world. 184 years ago, at approximately this very moment, a decisive battle took place here that would forever change the historic path of Mexico, Texas, and the United States. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever live stream commemoration of San Jacinto Day. I'm Gary Foreman, and I'll be your host for this unique and compelling presentation. Joining me over here at our control center in Austin is my partner and co-producer, Chris Blankenship of Production 4, who will be handling all the technical feeds in for this program. Chris, boy, I'll tell you, good to have you on board.
Hey, Gary, I'm glad to be here. This is really exciting. We haven't done a program quite like this before. We're somewhat at the mercy of technology. We're pulling people in from all across the state, and actually you're in a different state. So if we hit a few bumps along the way, please bear with us. We're going to be telling some great stories of the Texas Revolution. It's going to be really interesting, fun stuff to see. You might even learn something. So with that, I'm going to ask you to take it away, Gary.
Okay, we're going to have some great storytellers with it, but Chris, I'm going to insert one email we just got from Gina Manlove in Pasadena. She says, now more than ever, we need to hear the story of struggle, resolve, and victory against all odds. And of course, that's so appropriate today. And to tell this big story, we have a great team that we've assembled here, panelists, and I'll name them off. And when I do, guys, girls, please wave at the crowd. First of all, I've got Jordan Anderson, lead educator, Washington on the Brazos State Historic Site. Georgia Davis, the site director in San Antonio at the Casa Navarro State Historic Site. There's, of course, we'll be going to a lot to Kate Johnson, lead educator, San Jacinto Battleground State Historic Site. Then not far away from there is Brian McCauley, site director at San Felipe de Austin. And then again, our old friend Scott McMahon, director at Presidio La Bahia in Goliad. So that's our team so far. Now, we will have some inserts you should know about. We have 2 special appearances by different people, making a total of 5 video inserts. The first one you should know about is Bill Irwin, who handles historic site operations for Texas Historical Commission. And then, of course, we'll have, and he, by the way, Bill has 3 inserts there. And then you'll see 2 inserts from Ernesto Rodriguez, curator from the Alamo. So here's our program. Let's go. We'll be stepping back, explain how we got here to 1836, especially this date, April 21. We'll also follow the Texas Revolution Trail, the 6 weeks between the Alamo and San Jacinto, and of course the destiny of San Jacinto and how that battle shaped up. And of course, the last part, of course, is going to be how we remember and preserve. We got some beautiful Okay, so all right, so let's look at this story that's got to be told in ways that we won't have a chance to tell all of it. That's why you need to visit these beautiful historic sites on your own, because we're only going to be able to tell so much in the hour that we plan for you. But here's how we would like to first tell you about this the revolution, is that to understand the whole sequence, we need to tell you about what the Texas Army was and how they performed on the field through all these different sites. For the first part of this, Ernesto Rodriguez from the Alamo will tell you about the beginning of the Texas Army.
With the Battle of the Alamo and the fall of the Alamo on March 6, 1836, it helps to prompt what would be considered called the runaway scrape. Now, prior to the fall of the Alamo, on February 14th, 1836, the commander of the site, James Clinton Neal, had left here to tend to family business with the promise of coming back with men and aid and supplies. And so when he leaves, it leaves the second in command, William Barry Travis, in charge with a co-commander named James Bowie. Now, after the fall of the Alamo, what has happened is the men that were coming with Neal are gathering at Gonzales, and that will become the nexus of Sam Houston's army. So the fall of the Alamo basically creates another army that'll go and fight with Sam Houston at San Jacinto.
You know, Ernesto brings up Gonzales. I want to give a shout out to the city of Gonzales, not only in the past, but also recently, really stepping up their historical programs. And you're going to hear so much more about them coming up in the next couple of years. Connected with all of this is this whole idea that we've already had several battles by the time the Alamo has had this siege and final attack. So we've already had attacks surrounding San Antonio. And one of the things that you'll find out is the prominence of the role of the Tejano, the native Texans, who played a key role, actually on both sides, but they play a key role in the independence of the Republic of Texas. So with that, we're going to go back to Ernesto right now, and he'll give us an insight on one particular Tejano we know very well. His name is Juan Seguin.
Unlike today, where we can just get on mass media, social media, and send out messages immediately, messages had to travel by courier. Now, some of the best horsemen in Texas were the native population, which is now called the Tejano population, the Mexican groups that lived here in Texas. One of them was Juan Nepomuceno Seguin. He was a captain of a cavalry unit, and so when time came to send a messenger out, they selected him because of his knowledge of the terrain and his ability to get to another location securely. Now, what happens when he leaves here is one of the things that they say is that he went out through one of the acequia paths and then got on a horse and took off, headed straight for Gonzales, where he got word that Fannin was indeed on his way, so he waits for Fannin. Then he finds out Fannin isn't coming, so then he starts thinking of what to do next. So the next man in the process is General Sam Houston, who tells them to hold on and wait for further orders.
Gary, let's back that up. You're muted there.
Sorry about that. There we go. Speaking of Tejanos, we're going to go to the Casa Navarro house in downtown San Antonio and bring up Gina Davis, who's the site manager there, and talk to her about his role, Navarro's role in the Texas Revolution and Declaration of Independence. Hi there, Georgia.
Hi, Gary. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here with everyone. This Navarro was an extremely important person in San Antonio, and also an important person to, what is going to lead us up to the Battle of San Jacinto.
Georgia, could you please identify where the Casa Navarro is located? I've been there many times, but it's actually in a surprising location. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your site there?
Absolutely. So it's downtown San Antonio, and it's only a couple blocks from San Fernando Cathedral. And it's actually just about a half a block away from the Market Square. So everyone knows where the Market Square is and where San Fernando is. It's a beautiful little spot. It's a nice little respite from the hustle and bustle of downtown San Antonio. And we have programs, and we have some temporary exhibits and some awesome hands-on exhibits that are permanent at the site. And we would love to welcome people. We would love to have locals and everyone from Texas come visit us.
No. Georgia, you have a really nice video clip that you want to show us about what the site is all about. So we're going to go to that and take a look.
That's great.
Casa Navarro is this wonderful little gem in downtown San Antonio. We are so fortunate that it was saved by the Conservation Society and by Navarro descendants back in the 1960s.
The Navarro family, the Seguin family are very prominent examples of Tejanos who formed very early ties to the incoming Anglo-Americans.
It is a tribute really to, not just to Navarro, but also to the work that his descendants have done to preserve it over the years. And it's also like a reminder of what used to be here.
My name is Sylvia Navarro Tillotson, and I'm a great-great-great-granddaughter of Jose Antonio Navarro and a sixth-generation Texan. Jose Antonio Navarro was one of the most influential political leaders of 19th century Texas. He was one of only 2 Tejano signers of the Declaration of Independence, and the only Tejano to help write the constitutions for the state of Texas and the Republic of Texas. As a young boy, he was an eyewitness to the revolution and the fight for independence from Spain. In later years, he witnessed the rewriting of that history. The Tejanos were being demeaned and their contributions in their fight for independence ignored and misrepresented. It was critical for him to set the record straight and relate the true story of the Tejanos' valiant sacrifices, and we have his eyewitness history with us today.
At Casa Navarro, in addition to Navarro's story, You also learn about the neighborhood that used to be here, Laredito. It's Little Laredo. And it was a vibrant neighborhood with doctors and lawyers and grocery stores, bakeries. When you come to the site, you can learn about what Tejano life was like in the 1850s when Navarro lived here in San Antonio.
Yeah, Georgia, I'd just say, tell us a little about the conditioning that Navarro had on this frontier town of San Antonio.
Absolutely. So when Navarro was a young boy, well, when he early on in his life, he experienced living in San Antonio. He was witness to quite a bit of scarcity, poverty, hunger. Not Navarro himself; his family was pretty comfortable financially, but he was not immune to the suffering that he saw around him. There were constant Indian attacks. They were so far out on the northern frontier of Mexico that they were really quite vulnerable, and actually they were neglected pretty much by the Mexican government. So they were. It was a rough spot, and it was actually. Texas was a rough place back then.
Yeah, tell about his role in the Declaration, because that's virtually unscripted, pretty much.
Right. Navarro really believed that welcoming Anglo-American settlers to Texas was the best opportunity for security and for economic expansion. So he really, he's so well experienced. He's self-taught. He only spoke Spanish. He didn't speak English, and even though that's a fact, he still was very well regarded. He spoke and he wrote with much he was very deliberate and very thoughtful. People held him in high regard. So he was elected to the to be a delegate from Bexar County, or from San Antonio de Bexar, along with his uncle, Jose Francisco Ruiz. And they kind of were, they're kind of shoo-ins. I mean, they were very, very intelligent and well-respected people.
So, as you said, I think you've wisely stated that he had his feet in two worlds. Yes. And that's unusual because most, and we'll find out very soon what's going on at Washington on the Brazos, this was not common for most of the people in the new delegation declaring independence. Georgia, thanks so much. We're going to move from San Antonio and head over to Washington on the Brazos, where we're going to meet up with Jordan Anderson, and he's the lead educator there at the historic site there at Washington on the Brazos. And Jordan, tell us a little bit about this beautiful place. I've been there several times. It's a gorgeous location. Tell us about where you're located and what people can see when they get there.
Absolutely. Washington on the Brazos State Historic Site is located between Austin and Houston, just north of 290. Out here, we have 300 acres for you to explore. On the grounds, we, of course, have our replica of Independence Hall, the original town site of Washington, and the Star of the Republic Museum, which features primarily the history of the days of the Republic, and Barrington Living History Plantation, which is the home of Anson Jones, the last president of the Republic of Texas. And that site is represented for 1850. Now, here in Washington, the convention would begin officially on March 1st, 1836. In total, 59 delegates would attend the convention. When some of those delegates were arriving in Washington, they weren't very happy to be here, noting that Washington was had about 12 buildings in it. The one road you could barely call it a road, it still had stumps in it. The hall that they were supposed to be meeting in did not have shutters, doors, windows, curtains. It was completely empty on the inside. To add to their discomfort, unexpected arrival came in March 1st, which was a norther that dropped the temperature down to 33 degrees and brought rain and sleet with it. We know all these things because the delegates would complain about it in their journals. Also, as these delegates are coming in some of them coming in from the east, they're catching up with the most recent news. Some of the delegates would learn on their arrival in Washington that Santa Anna and his army have returned. They are reading for the first time William Travis's letter from the Alamo that he wrote on February 24th, stating he is besieged there by the Mexican army and he needs support. So on March 1st, the pressure's really put on these delegates. So they would quickly determine that Texas was no longer fighting in support of the Mexican Constitution of 1824, and they were fighting to become their own republic. So we would have a committee write a Declaration of Independence. It would be brought to the convention on March 2nd, and then ratified and signed on March 3rd after it was approved. In total, 59 delegates would sign. Now, while that declaration was being signed on March 3rd, Travis at the Alamo was writing his final letters to the convention. Those letters would arrive on March 6th. In these letters, Travis would state that he had received some reinforcements and was better provisioned, but the situation there is dire. He would beg and plead for the delegates in Washington to write and adopt a Declaration of Independence, a constitution, and form an interim government. Now, understandably, this is not great news. So they're unsure of what they need to do next.
Jordan, some of the same situations happened 60 years earlier with the American Revolution, and those who are signing their lives away, in front of their enemy are taking a huge risk here, aren't they, with the delegates coming in?
Yes, they are effectively signing their own death warrants. And on March 6th, as we all know, the Alamo would fall. Travis was prodding the delegates, stating that they needed to declare independence and write a constitution and all that, so that they knew what their loss would be for and what the entire world knew what was being fought for. Now, there was debate about what they needed to do next, whether they should form a militia and march to the Alamo. Sam Houston and other delegates convinced them that they needed to remain there and continue their work. Houston would be reappointed General of the Armed Forces and would leave on March 6th to take control of the army forming at Gonzales. Delegates would continue working, but soon other delegates would rejoin the army. Pictured here, we have James Collinsworth. We also have Robert Coleman here, who wasn't particularly a fan of Sam Houston and would be critical of him later. Of course, we also have Thomas Jefferson Rusk. Initially, he would be appointed interim Secretary of War for the temporary government, but he would join the army before San Jacinto. Here we have pictured Lorenzo de Zavala. He is one of 3 native Spanish-Mexican-born citizens here at this convention, and he would be selected as vice president for the interim government. The convention would only stay here in Washington. Backing up a little bit, we have 3 native Spanish-born citizens at this convention. The rest are immigrants from elsewhere. 42% of them had been in Texas for fewer than 2 years at this point in time. The delegates would stay in Washington March 17th, forming a government and writing a constitution before they would leave town upon hearing that the Mexican army was nearby.
Wow. Quite a desperate time. And of course, everyone's trying to figure out, well, where's the army? And what we can do now is move to another site that had an army, a very small one, but in a very unique location, a Spanish Presidio that was built in the 18th century. And we go to Goliad to visit Scott McMahon, the director there at Presidio La Bahia, to discuss all the events that surrounded that location and how it created another battle cry for the revolution. Welcome aboard, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Gary. Presidio La Bahia is located about 90 miles or so southeast of San Antonio and about 140 or so miles west-southwest of Houston. We're only about 30 miles from the coast. So Presidio La Bahia has been a key location for a long time in Texas's military affairs because of its proximity to the coast. It served as a customs house for a while. And this was really the only true fortification built in Texas during the Revolution, or that existed during the Revolution. It had been built during the Spanish period. Presidio was taken by the Texian forces in the fall of 1835 under command of Philip Dimmitt. He, in concert with Texians and Tejanos from Victoria and from the area here, attacked the fort with the help of the Badeños, the local Badeños, and captured it, and it remained in the hands of the Texian army throughout the remainder of the Texas Revolution. During the time that the fort existed as a Texian military installation, it changed hands. It went from Dimmitt to Collinsworth, and in January of 1836, it came under the command of James Walker Fannin. Fannin took over the fortification and immediately started to strengthen the defense. He dug ditches inside the walls, shored up the walls against artillery fire, and drilled his army. You mentioned that he had earlier. Now, his army was about 400 strong. It was made up of mainly young men that had come in from the United States. They came here looking for adventure and excitement and weren't really all that fond of having to drill 3 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, and somewhere in between there dig ditches and stand guard. But Fannin was able to whip his army into shape. And as he was here, news started to come in of what was going on outside of the Presidio. News came in of the convention declaring independence, which the garrison here had declared independence in December, but it had been deemed premature by the Texians. News came in of the fall of the Alamo, and eventually Houston sends a letter and says, you guys need to leave. You need to retreat, join up with me as we head further east into the colonies. So Fannin retreats from Fort Defiance. He gets about 8 or 9 miles outside of town, and one of his supply wagons breaks down. And by that point, General Urrea, in charge of the Mexican forces here, had caught up with him and surrounded him at a place called Coletta Creek. And after having a battle through the day and being pinned down overnight and eventually realizing that their situation was hopeless, Fannin and his command surrendered to General Urrea. They were brought back here to the fort and for about a week were kept as prisoners, eventually being told that they were going to be sent back to the United States. Now, these guys all thought they were going to be paroled to the U.S. They were excited about this. They were split into 3 groups, marched out of the Presidio on 3 separate roads. They got about a mile outside of the fort, and each one of the groups was halted. The Mexican soldiers that were escorting them stepped in, turned on the Texians, fired into them, and they massacred Fannin's men. And the reason they did this was because Santa Anna wanted to make an example of them. He didn't want prisoners of war. He wanted to make an example of these Texians, hopefully to dampen the spirit of the Texian army. And so he had argued back and forth with General Urrea about massacring these men. Urrea had already moved on to Victoria. The command fell to Colonel Portilla, who on March 27th, 1836, marched the Texians out and massacred them on Palm Sunday. Now, not all of the men were massacred. Some of the men escaped with the help of Francita Alvarez, who was Angel of Goliad. Some of them survived the massacre. One David Jones was able to escape the massacre and made his way to San Jacinto. And some of the men that were captured outside of the Presidio later escaped and made their way to join up with military forces that were assembling all over Texas. Some of them made it to San Felipe and joined up with Mosley Baker's company, which I think we'll talk about it a little bit later time. But that kind of gives you an overview of what took place here at the Presidio and its importance during the Revolution.
Yeah, and Scott, great job, by the way. A new battle cry or another battle cry besides "Remember the Alamo" comes out of this, and we'll
remember La Bahia.
Yeah, exactly. Remember La Bahia. What a beautiful site you have. Scott, we're going to move to the northeast and up towards the Brazos River once again and catch up with Brian McCulley, site director there at San Felipe de Austin. And, Brian, you've got the one of the oldest and newest stories of Texas history because, this is the Anglo capital of Texas in the 1820s. But you've got a great story to tell. Welcome aboard there, Brian.
Thanks, Gary. We're excited to be with you today. And I'm speaking to you from the exhibit hall here at San Felipe de Austin at our new facilities that opened almost exactly 2 years ago. And we're super excited to be part of this story and to be able to share with your viewers some of the things that happened here that were pertinent to the story and can help them understand a little better what was going on at San Felipe de Austin.
So when we look at the site, tell us where you're exactly located, because you're actually close to Houston.
Right. So we're off the I-10 corridor between Houston and San Antonio. So a very easy find for travelers in Texas, just a couple of miles north of the interstate corridor, 45 miles from downtown downtown Houston, sorry. There you can see an image of the new building and facilities that we opened up here. To your point about old and new, we like to think we're telling a very old, important Texas story in a lot of new ways. And so we use some technology in the exhibit. Some of the images you're seeing now are the original historic site where we do have some commemorative pieces and the like. But the new facility is really getting a great response from visitors. It's a place that's connected to the story that they already love. It's connected to the events and people that they learn about in relation to this Texas independence story. And we're privileged to be able to share some pieces of it that maybe aren't as well known. And that really tends to resonate with our visitors. So we're excited that they come and have a chance to have this experience. We serve school children. Many of them, when they ask us questions, are shocked that we have a connection to both San Houston and Santa Ana, as well as some of the other big players who are part of the Texas Revolution story. So while we're relatively new, it's still probably unknown to most Texans who may be watching today or visitors to Texas. We hope if you haven't made it out yet, you'll come out and give us a shot here pretty soon.
You know, Brian, as with all the other historic sites in Texas, archaeology plays a key role here, and your site is just the same as them. I mean, you've found some incredible relics on your grounds, have you not?
We have had the privilege. A lot of the archaeology has taken place in the last 20 years, although it's certainly been a known archaeological site for longer than that. It is a state archaeological landmark, so we're very proud of the stewardship that we provide for these resources, along with really deep dive archival research into Stephen F. Austin's plan for this town, which served as the capital of his colonies in Mexican Texas, where he was issuing land grants. It gives us a chance to use those written resources combined with archaeological excavations to better understand what was happening here. We've got some fabulous parts of our collection on exhibit that come from those archaeological reviews. So you're seeing some of the artifacts come across here now. Oftentimes we're doing field work in the lab work in the field where we process artifacts right there where we find them. So some of these images are from those projects.
Yeah.
We're going to conclude, I think one of the last images you'll see is related to a printing history here at our site. So we're very proud, one of the great connectors between us and the Alamo and San Jacinto and Washington on the Brazos has to do with the most famous printer in Texas, Gail Borden, who's running a weekly newspaper to support the Revolution government, but also printing all the famous documents, including Travis's letter from the Alamo and the Declaration of Independence. So that's a lead piece spacer that would be used in setting letterpress type back in the day.
Okay, we're talking about a lot of drama in the Texas Revolution right around San Felipe, and it's somewhat bittersweet because tell us about what happens, including what we call now the runaway scrape. We've got people trying to run away from the dangers posed by the Mexican army. So tell us about the chaos and the drama that takes place at San Felipe.
Absolutely. By evacuating citizens and the militia here plays a huge role in the archaeological resource we just talked about. So when Houston's army is retreating and they camp here close to San Felipe, he announces that they're going to move north to a place called Gross's Plantation. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But that's where the local militia essentially revolts and says, no, they're not going to abandon the citizens of town. They really need to defend the town. And so Houston assigns them to do just that. They evacuated. They burn the town on the word that the Mexican army is close by. And this is a strategy that had begun in Gonzales as the Texas Army is retreating. And they're burning these villages behind them as a scorched earth policy to remove supply line. And it really makes the Texas Revolution a story that touches everyone. It's a civilian story for women, children, and the infirm who may not be on a battlefield. They're essentially running for their lives, trying to figure out where these battles are going to take place. So Baker's a great story for us. He had a long-standing feud with Houston over what he was asked to do here, over Houston's strategy in the military, but ultimately he and his men joined Houston and are part of that victory in San Jacinto.
Yeah. As we said earlier, not only does the town of San Felipe die there in flames, but that same year in December, Stephen F. Austin also passes away.
That's true. He was serving in the administration of Sam Houston as the first president of the Republic. He was serving as Secretary of State when he died.
Yes. Okay, our next segment, Destiny at San Jacinto. Okay, to help us with this part of the story, we're going to go to our lead educator in San Jacinto Battleground State Historic Site with Kate Johnson. Kate, welcome aboard. We've got a great story here, and even more so, can you help us find San Jacinto Battleground on the map and tell us about your site?
Yeah, we are located in Eastern Harris County. We're about 20 miles from downtown Houston, just north of Highway 225 off Independence Parkway. The park's about 1,200 acres. It's mostly prairie and marsh, and it also includes the Texian camp and the actual battleground, and it's home to the San Jacinto Monument. In the base of the tower is the San Jacinto Museum of History. They've got a fantastic collection that is full of artifacts related to Texas history. And you can also take the elevator up to the top of the tower, right underneath the star, and get these amazing panoramic views of the battleground. And if it's a clear day, you can see downtown Houston. So
let's set the stage here, Kate, before we get to, of course, to your site. Walk us through the process that the Texas Army is now going through. Brian mentioned Gross's plantation. Why don't you take us there to help us understand what the next steps are and how they're involved in marching us to April 21, 1836?
Of course. After San Felipe de Austin, Houston takes his army north to Gross's plantation, which is about halfway between Washington on the Brazos and San Felipe de Austin along the Brazos River. And that is Houston's first and only chance to train his troops. Most of the Texas military is made up of militia companies that have joined while they're on the march, while they're on this retreat eastward. And this is Houston's only chance to actually train these men and have them learn how to act as a cohesive unit. Also, while the Army was at Gross's plantation, they were joined by Thomas Jefferson Rusk, who was the Secretary of War. I'll let Jordan talk about that a little.
Yes. Yes, well, the interim government had gathered at Gross's plantation for a while. They did move on closer to the coast. But after a while, they weren't really sure whether or not Sam Houston was planning on fighting. So they knew that he was training his troops, but there had been previous occurrences where Sam Houston was in a position where he could launch an attack. So they would send Secretary of War Thomas Rusk back with a letter written from interim President David Burnett. And I'll read that to you now. The letter reads from Burnett: "The enemy are laughing you to scorn. You must fight them. You must retreat no further. The country expects you to fight. The salvation of the country depends on your doing so." Rusk was actually sent with the ability to remove Houston as general of the armed forces. However, upon hearing Houston's plan for potential further future action, he would agree with it, leave him in his post, and accept a position in that army.
Okay, so both Kate and Jordan and others, for the first time, the Texas Army finally gets its own artillery pieces. It actually has cannon for the first time. Tell us about that.
Yeah, as Houston's army is leaving Gross's plantation, gets this very welcomed gift, the Twin Sisters. Those are the 2 6-pound cannon. They're the only artillery that Houston's army has at the Battle of San Jacinto. They were actually a gift from the city of Cincinnati, so thank you, Cincinnati.
And so what entails after that? They move out of Gross's, but it's a very difficult march. And let's talk about this first choice they have to make coming up here now.
One of the mysteries surrounding the Battle of San Jacinto is the fork in the road. As the army leaves Gross's plantation, after a couple of days, they reach a fork in the road. One fork leads east to Nacogdoches, one leads south to Harrisburg. As Jordan and Brian have already mentioned, there was a lot of contention between Houston and the government, Houston and his men, because he wouldn't stand and fight. And there were rumors floating around that he was going to try and continue retreating east. Nobody really knows what happens at this fork in the road. Houston was not leading his men, and the men who were in the front of the army chose to go south. Houston claimed this was his plan. Others in the army claimed that he didn't want to. We don't really know. But what ultimately happened was the army went south to Harrisburg and then on to San Jacinto and battle.
Okay, so while all this is happening, we have the other side of the story developing, and that's with the Mexican armies under Santa Anna. Let's go into their approach that will eventually create this this collision course here. What's happening with the Mexican army? And by the way, I've got to tell you, this is a well organized and trained army, but they're suffering like the Texans are with the weather and the conditions and lack of food. So both sides are struggling here. What's happening with the Mexican forces right now?
Santa Anna and his men are crossing the Brazos River down in Fort Bend, but Santa Anna has a large army, so it takes a couple of days for them to get across. And at this point, Santa Anna is more concerned about capturing the Texas government than he is capturing the Texas army. He finds out that Burnett, the newly appointed president, David Burnett, and the rest of his cabinet were in Harrisburg. So he takes 750 of his best dragoons and he races on ahead. Burnett and his men are able to escape, but they realize they need a safe place to spend the war. So they decide they're going to go to Galveston. The port to get out to Galveston is the town of New Washington. That's now in modern-day La Porte, Texas. And that is where Santa Anna and his men meet up with the Texas government. Burnett, De Zavala, their families are standing on the shore, ready to get in the boat to take them out to Galveston. And a Texas courier comes galloping down the hill, shouting, "Make haste, Mr. President, the Mexicans are coming." Burnett, De Zavala, they leap into a boat, they push off from shore, but they're only 30 or 40 yards away from shore when the Mexican vanguard arrives. They line up, they aim their rifles. But the man in charge is named Colonel Juan Almonte, and he looks out and he sees that in the boat there are women and children. Specifically, he sees Hannah Burnett sitting next to her husband, and he orders his men to hold their fire. He is not willing to risk killing a civilian, and so he allows Burnett and De Zavala to escape.
It's an amazing story. I mean, that fate was within seconds. I think they said it was within 30 seconds. Everything could have changed had they not gotten that boat. Yeah, amazing.
Exactly.
No, amazing story. So now everything changes because we're reversing. Santa Anna wants to cut off Houston. He thinks he has them in his grasp, even though his numbers are smaller. But now he thinks he has an advantage to cut him off at Lynchburg.
Yes.
Kate, tell us how this all comes together. What's setting us up for the battlefield now?
When Houston and his army get to Harrisburg, one of his scouts, Duff Smith, captures a Mexican courier, and in this guy's saddlebags, there's a letter from Santa Anna to another one of his generals explaining that he has split his army, he's rushed off to New Washington. And so now Houston, A, knows where Santa Anna is going to be, and B, knows for the very first time he's going to have superior manpower if he can get to Santa Anna before the rest of the Mexican army can catch up. As Houston leaves Harrisburg, he has to leave behind about 200 men because they're ill. And he initially assigns Juan Seguin and the Tejano Company to be one of the groups that stay behind and guard them. When Seguin finds out, he goes to Houston and he argues, he points out that he had been at the Alamo. He lost men at the Alamo, that his family lands were right around San Antonio. He couldn't go home. And that unlike most of the men in the Texas Army, he was a native Texan. He was born and raised here. He had more right than anyone to fight for Texas's independence. And Houston appreciated that bravery, and Seguin and his men end up firing some of the first shots on April 21st.
Right. We got to mention here that many people don't realize that the force that Santa Anna has with him is really a small number compared to what is outside the area. In fact, there's, I believe, 4 other forces that are all larger than Houston's army right now. And so, critical point.
Yeah, Santa Anna has several thousand men not with him. He only has that 750 with him.
Right.
Houston at this point has about 930.
Yes. And so now we get into numbers, as you mentioned, Kate, and let's see how this shapes up. On April 20th, then, the two sides arrive both at the plains of San Jacinto. The Texans get to Lynchburg Ferry, or Lynch's Ferry first, and a couple hours later, Santa Anna shows up. So here we have the situation. Brian, Scott, anybody want to jump in and tell us what's shaping up here real briefly?
Sure. Basically what's happening is both the armies, the Mexican and Texan army, are positioning themselves on the battlefield in preparation for a major engagement. Of course, on the 20th, that's not what's going to happen. On the 20th, we have a skirmish between the artillery of the Texian army and the Mexican army.
Mm-hmm.
The sisters that Kate mentioned earlier were employed. And then the Texians under Sherman lead a charge against the Mexican camp in an attempt to capture the Golden Standard, which was the big gun that the Mexican army had. One of the key things that happens at this point is an individual who was fairly new to Texas from Georgia by the name of Mirabeau B. Lamar is able to show his heroism on the battlefield. He charges out and actually rescues Secretary of War Rusk, who had been unhorsed, and then gets between the Texian cavalry and the Mexican cavalry, and again saves another Texian, a fellow by the name of Lane, who would become a general later on in the Civil War. So it's a cavalry skirmish and an artillery duel, but it's not the major engagement that we're all here to talk about today.
Okay, so with that said, we have a clip coming up by Bill Irwin, who's going to shed some light on the next morning when Houston wakes up and faces the situation in his camp. Let's talk about that with Bill's.
So Sam Houston faced a number of issues on the morning of April 21st. He had a good night's sleep after the skirmish of April 20th. All of his troops were riled up. They were ready to fight. He slept in. But when he got up in the morning, he saw that General Casa was bringing in reinforcements, which meant that his army was no longer superior to the Mexican force that was on the field. And that caused a lot of issues throughout the whole campaign. Sam Houston kept everything real tight to the vest, but on this day, April 21st, he decided to have his first war council and consult his generals. And all of his generals said, we should wait. We should let the Mexicans attack us. Sam Houston thought about that for a while and decided to, again, take his own counsel and decided to attack later that afternoon.
Okay, well, let's set the stage now. We've got this. Cosa's troops are in there. The superiority is not in favor of the Texans. So, what now takes place here, Kate, with the army? What are they looking at?
They are preparing for battle. The Mexican troops have created a barricade around their camp, about a mile away from where the Texans are, and Houston is trying to motivate his troops and get them ready.
Yeah. We also have some interesting leadership taking place now. Mosley Baker gives a speech, I think, isn't it about this time? He lets the troops know how they should conduct themselves in battle.
Right before battle, yeah, Mosley Baker from San Felipe de Austin gives this really stirring speech.
Yeah.
Brian, you want to talk about it?
Sure. So again, we mentioned Baker earlier as being one of the militia captains who was having some antagonism with Houston, but he's noted by many men on the battlefield of giving this stirring speech that we've already referenced several times today that concludes with remember the Alamo, remember La Bahia, and reminding his men what they're fighting for. Supposedly in part of the speech, he reminded them that the Mexican army had taken no prisoners at the Alamo and at Goliad. So that was something that he was making sure they were thinking about as they defended their homes and their freedom. So it was a really powerful moment. I've always enjoyed that some of the other officers in the field suggested they weren't that great at being the speaking leaders. So they directed their men to listen over there at what Baker's got going on that might get you ready to go out on the field.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, things are moving fast right now on April 21. And this means that there's a strategy that takes place that Houston sends out Dev Smith. Let's talk with Bill Irwin right now and watch his clip on Vince's Bridge. Let's see what goes on here.
So one of the issues that Sam Houston faced on the morning of the 21st was that there's only one way in. Reinforcements had already come in. General Casa had crossed Vince's Bridge at Vince's Bayou. And Sam Houston knew that to stop any other Mexican troops from coming, he needed to have that bridge destroyed. He also wanted his troops to know that they either had to fight or die because there was no way off this peninsula. Vince's Bridge was their only lifeline for the Texans and the Mexicans.
Okay, so now this sets the stage for the dramatic face down between Sam Houston and Santa Anna. So let's set the stage here between Kate and Scott. Let's discuss the battle formation with the map we got coming up here. tell us how Houston's army is deployed for quick action on the plains of San Jacinto.
He lines his men up in 2 parallel columns with artillery in the middle. Lamar, who is now in charge of the cavalry, he swings out far to the right to be able to draw the Mexican cannon fire, and the rest of the men are able to advance through this tall grass prairie. The grass was 3 or 4 feet tall, and they were able to get almost to the Mexican camp before the Mexican army realizes they were under attack. At that point, it was late in the day. Most of the Mexican army was either napping, their guns weren't loaded, their horses weren't saddled, they weren't ready to fight. And it is a quick battle. The cannons only fire a couple of times, according to soldiers later on. Many of the Texas soldiers are only able to fire their guns once or twice before they are at the Mexican camp, and it turns into hand-to-hand fighting.
Okay, so this goes fast, and Scott, let's talk about what happens as General Houston here in the battle.
Oh, one of the things I didn't want to jump in on top of Kate, but the tactics that the Texians use at San Jacinto are they're not anything special or anything really involved. The Texians march out, as Kate said, in a column of order, and then they form a line of battle. They fire, and then they charge into the Mexican camp. But the interesting thing historically about this is that Houston had only been in one battle prior to San Jacinto, and that was the Battle of Horseshoe Bend during the War of 1812 against the Red Stick Creek Indians. And that's the same exact tactics that Andrew Jackson used to assault the breastworks that the Red Sticks had thrown up. So Houston knew this, he knew it worked, and he employed it at San Jacinto, and basically it worked again, another 20 some odd years after the fact. So that's always been kind of a neat thing that a lot of people don't realize about that battle.
Well, one thing you'll see on the battlefield is markers where Houston's horse and where Houston also goes down from either a combination of rifle fire or grape shot. And so he loses 2 horses, and he's wounded, I believe, in the left ankle. And severely, and he's the battle by this time is in full fury. Kate, you're on the battlefield probably more than anybody is now. Tell us what happens after the 18 minutes.
We talk about this as an 18-minute battle, from when the first shots were fired until the Mexican camp was overrun. And we also say that 600 Mexicans died during this battle, but that's misleading. It's not 600 Mexicans who died during that 18-minute battle. The Texans were remembering the Alamo. They were remembering La Bahia. They were angry and they were ready to fight. And so for about 2 hours after that 18-minute battle, they hunted down and killed as many Mexican soldiers as they could find. Houston tried to stop them, but he had more or less lost control of the army. There's this great story where he's shouting at his men, "Gentlemen, I applaud your bravery, but damn your manners."
Absolutely. I mean, and then, Kate, there's something else, and I know archaeology helped you out with this too. There was a surrender by Almonte, who we talked about earlier. And now Almonte has several hundred men under his command, and they know their time is up. And what does he do?
He realizes that their only chance to survive is if he can get the Texans to start taking prisoners. And so he gets these 200 men together, and when they're come upon by a Texas scouting party, they step out of the bush, and en masse, they drop their weapons, they drop their ammunition, and they surrender. They vastly outnumber the Texas scouting party, who has now captured them, and the scouting party realizes that it is prudent for them to actually take prisoners. And ultimately, about 650 Mexican soldiers are taken prisoner that evening.
Yeah, quite a loss there. And also, by the way, one of the escapees, of course, who got away is, of course, Santa Anna. And he'll be found the next day 8 miles away. And then Bill Irwin has another clip on the whole surrender with Santa Anna. Let's take a look.
Santa Anna was brought before Sam Houston and basically surrendered. He was asking for terms. Sam Houston said, "No, we won. You lost. You're now captured." So Sam Houston, in meeting Santa Anna, required Santa Anna to write some letters ordering his men, the remaining Mexican armies in Texas, to head south below the Rio Grande. So at that point, Sam Houston makes that critical decision not to punish or not to kill Santa Anna, execute him, like Santa Anna would have done to the rest of the Texan prisoners if he had won, but to use the political decision to keep Santa Anna alive and provide that opportunity for him to send his troops out of Texas.
So we're in this place now where we not only remember the Alamo and San Jacinto, but all these other sites, thanks to this great panel. Kate, one more time, tell us why people need to come to your site.
San Jacinto is the battle that happens at San Jacinto is one of the most important moments in Texas history. It is a pivotal turning point for Texas history. It's where Texas is born. Before this battle, we are a part of Mexico, and after this battle, we are the Republic of Texas. Texans are really proud of the fact that we are the only state that was our own independent nation before we joined the U.S., and that is because of this battle.
Well said. And right now we have a couple video clips that pretty much underscore how Texans feel about your site there, Kate. This will be both Carla Miller and Jeannie Travis. Take a look.
The pilgrimage to the Alamo is a solemn event held annually during Fiesta San Antonio to honor the memory of the fallen heroes of the Battle of the Alamo and in tribute to the victory at San Jacinto in 1836. The Daughters of the Republic of Texas were given custodianship of the Alamo in 1906 by the state of Texas, and minutes from Alamo Mission Chapter meetings indicate that the first pilgrimage was held in 1918 when Boy Scouts came to the Alamo and were given handmade Texas flags on April the 21st, San Jacinto Day. In 1926, the pilgrimage became an official fiesta event. Over the years, near twilight on the first Monday of Fiesta, individuals, the military, and civic groups from all over the state walk in respectful silence to the shrine of Texas liberty, while a roll call of the Alamo heroes echoes throughout Alamo Plaza. Wreaths and flowers are laid on the greenwood in front of the Alamo. Alamo Mission Chapter continues this 102-year-old tradition even today, and we do it to remember the victory at San Jacinto.
I am Jeannie Travis, President of Fiesta San Antonio Commission. Fiesta is a citywide celebration of Texas history and the diversity of our rich blend of cultures. The founding event of Fiesta was held in April 1891 on the 55th anniversary of the Battle of San Jacinto. Based on the Spanish and Mexican tradition of a flower parade, our citizens processed downtown and, reaching Alamo Plaza, divided into two groups, tossing fresh flowers at one another in mock battle. Thus, the first Battle of Flowers parade was born, and 129 years later is joined by 100 plus different events to showcase our history and honor our Texas heroes. 2.5 million people celebrate our 10 days of Fiesta, centered around April 21st, Texas Independence Day.
Well, there we have it. We have a way of not only does Texas remember, Texas will not cancel or postpone anything. In fact, in the Fiesta in San Antonio, it's officially going to be moved to November. So it will continue on, even as a half year later, but it will go on. That's how important San Jacinto Day is to Texas. I want to thank the panel, certainly our sponsors, and to all of you out there for joining us in this very unique presentation. Technology held up for the most part, and we're so glad you stayed with us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and God bless Texas.
Thank you for joining us today. The history of the Texas Revolution, from the Alamo to San Jacinto, changed the lives and fortunes of Texans, changed the United States, and changed the world as we know it. We celebrate the Texas revolutionaries, the defenders, and the heroes of this era every day at the Alamo. God bless you and your family, and God bless Texas.